Okay, hello everyone and welcome to the last session of the Museum of Contemporary Art Interdisciplinary program for 2021. This program is created to provide discussion on concepts, ideas, and practices in the wide interdisciplinary fields of art and culture. It's my great pleasure and honor to introduce our guest speaker tonight, Boris Groys. Boris Groys is a philosopher, essayist, art critic, media theorist, and internationally recognized expert on Soviet-era art and literature, specifically the Russian avant-garde. He is a global distinguished professor of Russian and Slavic studies at New York University. His work engages radically different traditions, from French post-structuralism to modern Russian philosophy. His manuscripts, I would say, essentially cover a wide range of topics that intersect between aesthetic and politics, that include but are not restricted to the following works. The Total Art of Stalinism, published in 1992, one of the most provocative aspects of Groys' arguments, relates to his discussion the Stalinist culture in the 1930s, is a direct extension of the Russian artistic avant-garde of the 1920s, or in other words, that avant-garde artists and writers were implemented by the advent of Stalinism in terms of the demand that art move from representing to transforming the world. In addition, in Art Power, published in 2008, Groys examines modern and contemporary art according to its ideological function, arguing for the inclusion of politically motivated art in contemporary art discourse. Groys considers art produced under totalitarianism, socialism, and post-communism. He also considers today's mainstream Western art, which finds behaving more and more according to the norms of ideological propaganda, produced and exhibited for the masses at international exhibitions, biennales, and festivals. Further, the work Introduction to Anti-Philosophy, published in 2012, where anti-philosophy is defined by Groys as the work of thinkers who have the same relationship to philosophy as the anti-art of Marcel Duchamp and other Dadaist artists. This anti-philosopher, broadly speaking, began with Kierkegaard and Nietzsche and mediated by Heidegger, led into the so-called continental philosophy. Finally, in his work, Russian Kosmism, published in 2018, he put focus on this philosophical doctrine that was developed by the Russian philosopher Nikolai Fedorov in the late 19th century. Russian Kosmism rejected the contemplative for the transformative, aiming to create not merely new art or philosophy, but a new world. Kosmism went further in its visions of transformation, calling for the end of death and free movement in cosmic space as a part of this radical biopolitical utopia. Through all these works, but also in many others, Groys provided powerful arguments in the favor of inherent relation between the arts and politics, particularly between various kinds of art and power across historical periods. As a prominent contemporary art theorist and critic, Boris Groys has also created a number of notable exhibitions. Along these lines, the work of Boris Groys is fundamental for understanding a range of contexts today in which what is artistic and what is political coexist with further social possibilities. His lecture today is called Becoming an Artwork, Art as a Self-Design. Boris, please, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your introduction. And so, I present my talk. In his Birth of a Tragedy, Nietzsche has written that it is better to be an artwork than an artist. If you believe Alexander Kojève, the desire to become an artwork is the most human of all human desires. Indeed, the animal, natural desires always negate the object. If I'm hungry, I eat bread and thus destroy it. Or if I am thirsty, I destroy water by drinking it. One says we live in a consumerist society, but consume means precisely to destroy. But the desire to be liked, to be admired, to become an object of the desire of the others makes me to be interested in others and their existence. Kojève calls the desire of others the anthropogenic desire. So desires that produce humans as such. In his introduction to the phenomenology of Hegel, Kojève writes, human history is history of desired desires. The desire of desire is what produces the self-consciousness, and one can say the self as such. But how to become an artwork? Our culture is often described as narcissistic, and often enough, narcissism is understood as total concentration on oneself, the lack of interest for the society. However, the mythological narcissist is not exclusively interested in himself. Obviously, he is not interested in satisfying his desires of whatever kind. Rather, he rejects them. He is very ascetic. But he is also not fascinated by any inner, subjective visions that are accessible only to his own contemplation and isolates him from the others. Rather, he is enchanted by the reflection of his own body in the lake that presents itself as an objective, profane image, produced by nature and potentially accessible to everybody. Thus, it would be wrong to say that narcissist is not interested in others, in society. On the contrary, he completely identifies his own perspective with an objective social perspective. Being a member of the Greek cultural community, he shares with other Greeks the same aesthetic taste. Thus, he assumes that others will be also fascinated by his worldly image. We are unable to like ourselves if we don't assume that we are liked by the society in which we live. The contemporary narcissist, however, cannot be so sure of his or her own taste. The contemporary subjects cannot rely on their naturally given looks. Instead, they practice self-design. That means they produce their own image with a goal to be liked by the society. Even the people who limit their designing activity to making selfies undertake some efforts to distribute them and get their likes which they want. But the self-design doesn't stop here, of course. We produce the aesthetically relevant objects and or surround ourselves with the things that we believe to be impressive and seductive. And we act publicly up to a self-sacrifice in the name of this or that public good to become admired by the others. This interest in self-design is characteristically modern, secular, atheistic. As long as God was thought as being alive, the design of the soul was more important to the people than the design of the body. The subject wanted his or her soul to be loved or at least recognized by God. The desire for the admiration by others, by the society, was regarded as a sin because it substituted the worldly recognition for the only true spiritual recognition, the external values for the inner values. The relationship of the subject to the society was ethical. One did something good for the society only to please God, not the society itself. The death of God signifies the disappearance of the divine viewer of the soul. In the secular age, God was substituted by the society, and thus our relationship to the society became erotic instead of being ethical. Suddenly, the only possible manifestation of the human subjectivity became its design. The shape of the classes in which the particular humans appeared, the everyday things with which they surround themselves, the spaces they inhabited. Where religion once was, design has emerged. Design is a religion of our time. In fact, this transformation has a long history. Once John Chrysostomos, the famous Byzantine theologian from the end of 4th and beginning of 5th centuries of our era, was asked by his students why Byzantine painting moved away from the traditional Greek representation of the naked bodies toward bodies that were covered by clothes. He answered, the problem is if you present the naked body, you cannot represent the soul. In other words, you can represent your soul only through your clothes. By putting clothes on your body, you can manifest your inner attitude towards the world. Clothes and language are both the ways in which we cover our body by a certain sign system. One can say that as naked bodies, we are not sufficiently incarnated. Our problem is not to overcome our captivity in our body, but on the contrary, to complete the process of incarnation, to practice self-incarnation, self-design. During the modern and contemporary times, the design has transformed the whole of the social space into an exhibition space in which individuals appeared both as artists and self-produced works of art. Thus, modern design avoids Kant's famous distinction between disinterested aesthetic contemplation and the use of things guided by interests. Indeed, the subject of self-design clearly has a vital interest in the image he or she offers to the outside world. It was once a privilege and a burden for the chosen few, but in our time, self-design has become the mass culture practice par excellence. Especially the internet became a place for self-presentation, from Facebook to YouTube to Instagram. Today, everyone is expected to be responsible for the image that he or she presents to the gaze of the others. And the subject of the self-design is not only interested in his or her own existence as an object in the world, but also in the existence of the mankind as the only possible spectator of this object. As a lover is interested in the existence of a partner to be able to be loved by him or by her, the subject of self-design is interested in the existence of the society, of the mankind, to be able to find recognition and admiration. But of course, we do not start the process of self-design at the point zero. We are always already designed by the society in which we are living. At the beginning of our lives, we get a birth certificate with a list of characteristics like nationality, origin, parents, place and date of birth. Then all this information goes into our passport and we have to repeat it over and over again. For instance, when we book a flight ticket or a room in a hotel. Thus, we permanently repeat the characteristic of our original design that we have no evidence, no memory of. And when we die, we get a death certificate. And the death certificate is like the birth certificate, only place and date of the death are added. So initially, the control over our design is bureaucratic. It is in the hands of the state. So we practice self-design when we try to take the process of incarnation in our own hands. We try to escape the state control and to take responsibility for our own mode of existence in the world through our texts, our performances, our paintings, through our work. And that means that our own self-design is always polemical. It is provoked by our dissatisfaction with the image that was given to us by the state bureaucracy. But how is this polemic possible? What does it mean that we practice self-design and self-incarnation in a polemical way? That means that we are looking at ourselves from the perspective of our future and not our past. We are not interested in our origin that is given to us by others. We are interested in what kind of shape we will come to our death. This is the basic change of perspective. This change of perspective allows me to think my life not from its beginning, but from its end. My life becomes a project that has a goal to create a certain self-image that I am ready to offer to the society. The question is, though, to what degree I am able to control this question, this image, to define it by my own strategy of self-design. The answer to this question partially depends on the answer to a following question. Do I want only to be like it here and now, or also to be remembered after my death? The memory functions, namely, in a different way than the immediate admiration here and now. I think that the main problem of contemporary culture is precisely that everybody wants to be like it here and now. But if you look at the history of mankind, beginning with Socrates and Jesus Christ, going to the artists of the avant-garde, you will see that people are remembered only if they were disliked during their lifetime. One only remembers what one dislikes. That is a very simple psychological fact. If you want to remain in the memory of others, you have to be systematically disliked by them. If you are ready to be disliked, it gives you a real historical chance. It might seem to be a strange rule, but it is a rule that remained unbroken during thousands of years. The reason for the validity of this rule is simple. A decision not to be liked perplexes the people and compels them to look at you more attentively. Look at the surveillance systems in our urban spaces, where everybody and every movement are recorded. In general, nobody is interested in this recording, and they mostly get lost. But if somebody commits a terrorist act, suddenly we get a huge gallery of images of this person, how he or she was behaving in the airport, what he or she bought in the supermarket, etc. Indeed, if somebody commits a terrorist act, people begin to ask the question, why did this person do that? The people can come to the conclusion that this person became a terrorist act because of being crazy or because of the economic conditions. But the point is that the society becomes interested in this person in the first place. You have to commit a crime to become interesting. People look at you and they do not understand why you did it. At the moment they start to answer this question, they begin to reconstruct your life. They begin to be interested in the documents about your life. They begin to be interested in you as a person. That is why the terrorists so often write a manifesto. They know that their motives will be investigated, and thus they are offered a chance of self-design. However, the image that they finally get is a combination of what they have actually produced and actively produced, and how they were covered by the media and the surveillance systems. The resulting image is a combination between actively and passively produced images. For the society, all these images are equally valuable because all of them are clues for answering the question, why one is so strange, so terrible, so provocative. And it is especially true when one has committed a strange and not quite explicable crime. If somebody goes to a supermarket and steals something, it is a crime, but it's not an interesting crime because its motive is clear. What is interesting is when one commits a crime that is inexplicable, the motives of which are unclear. Then people take a second look and third look and so on. They write one's biography, and all this machinery of cultural production begins to work, which is actually what creates one's public corpse, one's mausoleum. It is not totally a subjective creation. It is a combination between what one did and how one has exposed oneself, voluntary or involuntary, to the public view. The same is with the artist. As far as an artist is okay, and we like what he or she is doing, nobody is interested in this artist. But at the moment the artist starts to do something strange, commits a kind of symbolic crime, then the society wants to find a reason for that. That is why so many of the avant-garde artists also wrote a manifesto. The artworks are the primary art documents, but we also have the stories about the artists, their own memoirs and memoirs about them, documentations of their exhibitions, their political positions, love stories, and so on. We take all that as one image. We cannot differentiate artworks from the other documents. The artwork is only one document among many other documents produced by the artist. But these other documents are very often produced in a passive mode. But if self-design is based on the idea of committing a crime, it is crucial here that one has also to be punished for it. Look at the basic narratives of our culture again. Christ committed a crime because he broke the religious law, but he did not want to escape the punishment for that. That is why the cross, the symbol of the punishment, became the symbol of Christianity. The same, of course, is true for Socrates, who also was punished by death for his philosophy and did not want to escape this punishment. I have chosen these two examples because one is at the origin of European religion and one other is at the origin of the European philosophy. In both of the cases, the plot is the same. One commits a crime and accepts a punishment. I think the clearest description of this plot was done by Søren Kierkegaard in his Fear and Trembling. He speaks there about Abraham, but the principle is always the same. One hears a call, something or someone addresses you, and you answer this call. Whatever you do after you have answered this call becomes obscure for the others because others did not hear this call. One cannot place this call in the normal context of life. It is never quite clear what it was and where it came from. But one begins to react to it. This call is obvious as a call of death. The death calls you and you answer it and begin to operate from the perspective of death. You cannot situate the source of the school in the present, but you cannot also situate it in the past. The death is somewhere in the future. It is a future per se. In the art context, we often speak about the medium, but this word has actually emerged in the context of Spiritism. There is a book by Allan Kardec, a French specialist of Spiritism. He was living in 19th century. The book of mediums, that is the first time the word of medium and mediums, searched in a title of a major book. Speaking about the mediums, he speaks about the people who are called by spirits or called spirits. And he speaks about the responsibility of the mediums to recognize the spirits which they call, or recognize the spirits who called them. And there is, of course, a question as to what degree the mediums are able to recognize the spirits. At the end of the book, Kardec states, it is impossible to establish if the spirits tell us the true name or not. For example, if you call the spirit of Napoleon, but it can be a very different spirit who comes and presents itself as Napoleon. If a spirit comes to you saying, I am Napoleon, then how can you say, is it a true or false spirit? At the end, Kardec says that there's only one rule which is helpful. The really important spirits, like for example, the spirits of Napoleon, never make jokes. They are never funny. Only very low spirits make jokes and are funny. Now, to use the internet is the same as to call a spirit during the spiritist seance. You just click a certain combination of signs on your computer, and then a spirit, a certain text or image appears. That is a fundamental principle of magic, that if you address a spirit in a magically correct way, the spirit cannot tell you, no, I do not want to appear. The same is with computer. If you call a text on an image, it cannot tell you, no, I don't want to appear. That is why many people think that after the death of their analog body, their digital, virtual bodies will survive somewhere in a digital cloud. And then these digital spirits could be called back to Earth by any user. So that is contemporary vision of afterlife spiritism and afterlife design. Today, the digital cloud substituted the traditional heaven, and Google substituted the divine memory. However, if I call a certain spirit on the internet, can I be sure that it is this particular spirit that will come? The only guarantee could be to check internet's hardware and software. And in fact, such a check is possible. Indeed, I think that people often forget that the internet is merely a combination of telephone and teletype. The cyberspace is not infinite. One has merely a limited number of telephones, monitors, other devices, all actually paid by the users. The internet hardware is the sum of the real objects in the world. The internet depends on technology, it depends on the economy, on your money, on our ability to pay for all of that. And the moment you begin to be realistic about all these things, the ecstatic feeling of being in a cloud disappears. So if internet would be immaterial, we wouldn't pay for it. Nobody pays for heaven or hell. And that means that we cannot rely on turning ourselves into the fluid virtual bodies floating in the digital clouds. Also in the digital era, we should think about our self-design and also about our post-mortal self-design. It remains true even if the fascination with electricity in its different forms is what characterizes our contemporary civilization. And electricity has no body, no image, no design. Today, when we speak about the development of technology, we know that all our technology is based on electricity. It is not traditional technology of the 19th century. It is electric technology. The whole concept of networking is electrical. We live in a time of a religion of electricity, understood as a new divine principle. But the electricity is actually purely material. We produce it, we buy it, we can switch it on and switch it off. That is why I would say that every web page is a thing like any other thing. We have only a limited amount of money, of paper, of computers, a limited amount of electricity. Our dreams of the infinite are finite. And as finite dreams of the infinite, they are carried by finite material carriers, like books, paintings, digital files, and so on. One can write a book about infinite ecstasies, but it will be a book of so many pages. And then one becomes interested in how much it brings in terms of royalties. Heidegger made a huge mistake, as he said that the death is the emergence of nothingness. That is not emergence of nothingness. My death is the emergence of my corpse and my second artificially produced body. Death is the sum of material objects that the world indicates for me. If I were nothingness, nobody would be interested in writing anything, in painting anything, saying anything, or regulating the financial heritage problems. When I die, my self-design remains. Self-design is a design of my own death. It is what I believe remains after my death. One can try to control it, but it is not quite possible. Social recognition, media echo, all these things one can control. Or one has to be a pharaoh. Actually, everybody would like to be a pharaoh. A pharaoh can control the pyramid and control the afterlife. To become a pharaoh is a good thing, especially for an artist. In our time, though, the individual pyramid is substituted by the collective museum. At the end of the 19th century, a Russian philosopher, Nikolai Fedorov, developed the concept of the museum of all dead and living people. Every human was supposed to get a separate space in this museum, a small private pyramid. In this space, all the traces of the existence of this human should be collected: photographs, clothes, text, body tissues. Potentially, such a universal museum should be used for the resurrection of all the people who lived in the historical past and immortalization of all the humans living in the present. The museum is fundamentally at odds with the concept of progress that consists in substituting the old things by the new things and the old generations by new generations. The museum does not punish the obsoleteness of the individual things by the removal and destruction. The Christian immortality of the soul is replaced here by the immortality of things or bodies in the museum. And divine grace is replaced by curatorial decisions and technology of museum preservation. Technology as a whole must become the technology of art. Then the human history becomes art history, because every human being becomes an artwork. This can be seen as the last step in the secularization of Christianity. For secularization remains only partial if it merely negates, censors, and prohibits the hopes, desires, and demands for the afterlife that religion articulates. It is not enough to say that there is no immortality and to prohibit people from seeking immortality. Rather, one should show how immortality could be reached by secular means. However, the artificial immortality is a fragile immortality. It is not ontologically given, like in the case of God or gods, but merely technologically secured. The dependence of the mankind on the cosmic events that are uncontrollable and even unknown is a source of the specifically modern anxiety. One can say cosmic anxiety, the anxiety of being a part of cosmos and not able to control it. Not accidentally, our contemporary mass culture is so much obsessed with the visions of asteroids coming from the black cosmic space and destroying the Earth. But this anxiety has also more subtle forms. As an example, one can cite the theory of the accursed share that was developed by Georges Bataille. According to this theory, the sun always sends more energy to the Earth than the Earth, including the organism living on its surface, can absorb. After all the efforts to use this energy for production of goods and raising the living standards of the population, there also remains a non-absorbed, non-used rest of the solar energy. The rest of energy is necessarily destructive. It can be spent only through violence and war, or at least through ecstatic festivals and sexual orgies that channel and absorb this rest of energy through the less dangerous activities. Thus, human culture, including the museums, becomes determined and engendered by cosmic energies, forever shifting between order and disorder. Here it becomes clear that the survival of individual human being is totally dependent on the readiness and ability of the whole humanity to protect it. Insofar as the society overtakes the role of the divine spectator, it also takes the responsibility for protecting the individual humans as objects of its contemplation. Already in the 19th century, Auguste Comte has spoken about a new secular positivist religion of humanity. Comte writes that the religion of humanity can be considered a true religion because it implies the veneration of something that undefinably exists. And only humanity truly exists. Comte writes further, I quote, "Man indeed, as an individual, cannot properly be said to exist except in the too abstract brain of modern metaphysicians." End of quotation. The individual human existence depends on social order, and the social order is based on the cosmic order. Comte reminds us that Newton has shown that we live under the same laws of gravitation under which the celestial bodies are moving. This is primarily the gravitational forces that keep our society together and order it. But of course, these forces cannot prevent a cosmic catastrophe that could destroy the humanity in its entirety. The anticipation of such a possibility, Kuhn says, makes the religion of humanity even more intense. Indeed, what is the goal for humanity? The answer is clear: its own existence. But if the actual existence of humanity here and now is a fact, its existence in the future is a matter of faith, of the social myth. This social myth, this secular religion, is necessary for our action, because if we would not believe that the humanity will forever exist, all our plans and projects will lose its horizon of realizability. Now we have already said that where the religions was, the design emerged. That means that society, if we want to survive, has to design itself and all its members in a way that they would be protected from wars, revolution, and destructive cosmic events. Such a society necessarily becomes a post-human society, in a sense that the members of this society will not be any more naturally reproduced and connected biologically, but artificially produced and connected by technology. The origin of the mankind will be not nature, by art. One can say that the practice of self-design was from its beginning nothing else as prefiguration of this post or transhuman condition. The self-design means actually the rewriting of the human inner psychological political attitudes or economic interests on the external media supports, different from the organic human body. The self-design creates a second artificial body that potentially substitutes and survives the nature of human body. This artificial body consists of the things that man has produced or collected. These things, artworks, books, film, photos, globally circulate and get dispersed. This dispersal is even more obvious in the case of the internet. If one looks on the internet for a particular name, one finds thousands of references that do not build any unity. Thus, one has a feeling that the secondary, self-designed artificial bodies are in a state of the slow motion explosion, reminding one of the final scene from Antonioni's Zabriskie Point. The museum turns into the digital cloud. The eternal struggle between Apollo and Dionysus, described by Nietzsche, leads here to a strange result. The self-designed body is dismembered, dispersed, decentered, but still keeps its virtual unity. However, this virtual unity is not accessible for the human gaze. Only the surveillance and search programs like Google can analyze the internet in its entirety and thus identify the second bodies of the living and dead. Here a machine is recognized by another machine and an algorithm is recognized by another algorithm. Maybe it is a prefiguration of the condition in which the whole mankind will survive as an artwork. Okay, thank you.
Thanks a lot for this wonderful and inspirational lecture. So we'll start with some questions. My first question is about the real, or this banalization of the reality. And as you mentioned, the internet gives to everybody the immediate possibility to present oneself on the global stage. So everybody make selfies, videos. So we are no longer have a mass culture of consumers, as you wrote also in your text, but the situations that was described by Adorno, but a situation of mass culture production, mass cultural production, where everybody is an artist, everybody is a writer, a philosopher. So it seems that this utopian promise that Joseph Beuys formulated in the 60s, that everybody will become an artist, creator of his or her own public persona, has been realized. Now, according to some statistic of Google, approximately 20,000 photos are stored each second in a hard drives. So an amount of information are so big and difficult to imagine, where individuals sharing moments that are totally forgotten after a few minutes. So this leads to some kind of the absolute banalization of the reality. So my question is, can this kind of the art as a self-design circulate only on the social networks, or can escape, let's say, as the real beyond this banalization, and that they can enforce some, let's say, new social imagination and mobilization? Thank you.
I don't think that we can escape banalization, because the human beings are a banal phenomenon, basically. Banalization is what humanity actually is. We all are actually banal. And this banalization begins already with having a name, having birth date of place and date of birth, and so on. So we get that document that is one of many. We have a photograph in our past, and that's it. Yeah. So as I described it, there is one way to escape this banalization is to break the rules, so to say. But today there's no rules, more or less. So it is difficult to break them. But if you look at our memory of the previous periods of human history, our knowledge about these periods is more or less accidental. And so I would say that this, so to say, going out of banality and remaining as a subject or as an individual in historical archives is more or less accidental event. Yeah, because if you look at the archaeological past, you look at our museums, so many paintings, so many statues were destroyed, so many manuscripts were burned. Yeah, what remained is remained accidentally. So I would say it is accidental.
Thank you. So, if I may, my second question relates to your early work, and fascinating analysis of the Russian avant-garde and Stalinistic culture. So, how do you see this legacy today in the relation of the Putin Russia? As we know that Vladimir Putin's rise to power came coupled with the new version of patriotism, relying on heroic and bright aspects of the Soviet past. For example, an image of Stalin re-emerged. So to what extent do you think that art, but also material culture of the Soviet period is appropriate today, is appropriate by the Russian representatives in order to create a new iconography?
Yeah, first of all, contemporary Russia is a capitalist state, and people are interested in money. Russia is not different from any other capitalist state with a semi-oligarchic structure as every state today. Now, if you operate in the media of a contemporary state, you always use, if you want to how to say, to reach your audience. You have to use names and facts with big recognizability. In the West, it's mostly Hitler, yeah, who used for this. In Russia, it is also Hitler, but also Stalin, yeah. But also in the West, yeah, if you make a movie about Stalin, you can reach a greater audience. The principle of contemporary culture is recognizability. It doesn't have to do with any revival of anything at all. It has to do only with trivial and banal character of the culture itself. This culture doesn't want to look at anything new. It wants to consume something it already knows. Yeah, that is a principle. Because the internet is principle. What is internet principle? And it is a mirror of our culture. You can only see on internet something if you click it. And you can click it if you already know it. Yeah? So it is structurally impossible to say anything new. And of course, you click something that you know and you believe everybody knows. So Stalin is one such person. You should not disregard the fact that in my period of living in the Soviet Union, Stalin's name was never mentioned. So from, let's say, 54, 56, until the end of the 90s, Stalin's name was taboo. Re-emergence of this name had to do with commercialization of Russian medias, because people were interested in looking at Stalin. It was old and new at the same time.
Thank you so much. Valo, would you like to join us in the discussion?
Yes, thank you. Professor Groys, thank you for your inspiring lecture. I would like to ask you about the role of the historical avant-garde, seen as a project of kind of de-skilling of what we still call art. And do you think that the contemporary condition is kind of or getting more clear if we return to what they're initially trying to do with breaking the rules, or this radical reduction of means of creation, of going away from visibility or
Well, I think that today we abandoned all the qualitative judgment about art. The only thing that remains is looking for the quantitative criteria. So criteria of how many likes, how many visits, and so on and so on. This particular artist or art event got. So popularity, not necessarily populism, but popularity is the only criteria, not even commercial, but not even money, but popularity is a criteria. Now, in this situation, artists can choose different strategies. One strategy is to be, as some of my students, art students saying here, viral, so world successful, very famous artists like Banksy, so I do not think that our cultural development at the moment goes in this direction. I think that the fragmentation of the cultural space and media space went so far that the global success became actually impossible. So what seems to be more productive is to building a community, so building a group of people that would like you and support you. And in this sense, avant-garde is a good model, because avant-garde, from our point of view, can be seen as an attempt of community building. It was, in a certain way, already in the 20s. We should not forget that all these groups, from supremacists in Russia to surrealists in France, all understood themselves as groups, as small minorities. They never expected any kind of commercial or global success. If you read the first Surrealist Manifesto by Breton, he presents a surrealist movement and a certain virtual house. If you want a virtual website, I don't know, network that connects people who don't even want to communicate with each other. They're connected in some kind of abstract way. So I think as a model for this kind of community building, different kinds of community building, also spiritual, political, and whatever kind, avant-garde is good today. But opposition between avant-garde and mass culture doesn't exist anymore. Not because avant-garde doesn't exist, but because mass culture doesn't exist. There is no masses. Mass culture is extremely fragmented. There is no unity. Every group, every strata of society, and so exist independent of each other. And internet very much enhances this process. You always remain in your own circle, actually.
Yeah, and in that context, this process of wide process of democratization of the means of artistic production, in a way, makes this new condition of disappearance of the public, of the audience. What once was a small group of people that were considered artists presenting to wider audience now radically switch on the opposite. What do you think about this in context of what you mentioned earlier in your lecture about this desire to be seen, the narcissistic position of paradoxically centering on oneself, but wanting. Are we approaching a situation where it will be a desire that cannot be fulfilled because the attention of the others is something that is less and less possible to reach?
It is a complicated question, but I think that you are completely right that the public disappeared. So disappearance of the mass culture has to do with disappearance of public. And that is, for example, the situation of the early avant-garde and a situation, for example, of the Soviet unofficial culture, which I spent some part of my life. You have everybody is producer and spectator at the same time. So what disappears is a clear division between producer and public, between artist and public. Everybody produces something, everybody is an artist. But that means also that everybody is a spectator. You know, Bataille speaks about bourgeois state as a state of confusion, because in classical feudal times, there were clear separation between people who enjoyed life as aristocracy and people who were working. And bourgeois state is a state of confusion because everybody is working and wants to enjoy life at the same time, which creates permanent conflict in the soul of the individual. And we have here in a culture of it also. So if everybody is producer and spectator at the same time, there is an inner conflict. But this inner conflict is less destructive than it seems to be. I think one can arrange with it. And in this sense, avant-garde is a good example of how you arrange with it. Because if you look at the avant-garde context, only people who produce art or poetry or whatever will be able to consume art. Yeah, to look at the surrealist art, you have to be part of the surrealist group. Yeah, you had to do something to be able to see something. And if you live in contemporary New York or Paris or even Moscow or whatever, you are confronted with the same situation. If you are not actively participating in a certain process, you have no access to the art that is produced. You have to go to get invitations, and you have to be present, and you get invitations where you are present only if you are doing something. Yeah. So I always say that I'm writing only to be able to look at art. Yeah. Yeah, because if you don't do that, you have no access, and you simply don't know what happens.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think that we can end the session. Professor Groys, once again, thanks a lot for all the great points. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation. It was good to be there. Yeah,
it was
bye.
our pleasure. Bye.